All right, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order this evening of September the 12th at 7 p.m. Kate, please call the roll.
Stacy Gloss,
Present.
Dustin Allred,
Present.
Morgan
White.
White,
Present.
Beth Mashesky,
Here.
Todd Rusk, Andrew Stumpf,
All right, I think, I think we have a quorum for this meeting. Are there any changes to this night's agenda? I printed out an agenda. I'm not sure if it was an earlier version that Scott had sent out, but the date should be updated for today instead of August 1st. Any other changes to the agenda? Great, moving along. We're going to go ahead. We need to do approval of minutes from the previous two meetings. I'm going to look for approval for the minutes for the meeting that occurred on June 6th. Do I have a motion to approve? Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, the minutes from the June 6th meeting are approved. All right. Thank you. All right. All right, it's been a couple of months since I've been here. So, all in favor of approving the minutes from June 6th, say aye.
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 All opposed? All right, that passes. Next, we're going to move on to the approving minutes for the July 11th meeting. Are there any changes to the minutes? Nope. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes for the July meeting?
I second it.
Great. All in favor? Say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, that is approved. Is there any public input for the meeting this evening? Okay. Communications report. Scott, do you have a report for us this evening?
Sure.
Please
Good
write
evening. First, some updates on Climate Action Plan progress. After an initial request for proposal and interviews, we have selected a company called CTS to conduct an investment-grade energy audit as part of a guaranteed energy savings project. That'll take a month or two. That will result in very specific energy efficiency proposals and payback periods and cash flow analysis and all that sort of thing. Staff and leadership will consider their proposals, probably make some edits to it, and agree on a final set of energy efficiency projects for city facilities and streetlights. That bundle of projects would go to City Council. We would get a loan to pay for the projects up front, and then the utility bill savings and avoided cost savings would pay off the loan in a cash flow positive manner. So we'll be working through that in the next couple months, and maybe late this year, early next year, we would see commencement of the first projects in that effort.
Scott,
Mhm.
can you talk about thresholds? Is it for making a decision? Is it simple cash flow positive or not, or is
Sure.
it more nuanced than that?
So the state statute requires that the bundle of projects together have a payback period less than 20 years. So that's kind of the point where, if you're at 21 years, you have to start removing projects. The ones that have the worst payback period, you remove those until you get 20 years or less. So that's what we're aiming for. Our focus is on projects with a really good return on investment in terms of utility bill savings, and 2, projects that are that need to be done in the next couple of years anyway, and that we can roll into this project and get done a little bit earlier, and conduct those projects in a finance manner whereby, again, when they're bundled with others, they pay for themselves. So deferred maintenance type projects, older pieces of mechanical equipment, part of the air conditioning, the heating, air handlers, any of that might be deferred maintenance or is maybe on its last leg. Those are the projects we're going to try and bring in, sooner rather than later. So not a lot of no vanity projects in this. It's really mostly high payback projects and really urgent projects.
Sounds good. Thanks.
We have officially closed new site assessments for Solar Urbana-Champaign. The contract closing date was the last day of August, but the installer and partners on the project agreed that if by that date persons who had already had a site assessment done for solar could sign a letter of intent to get their contract in order in the next month. So essentially for folks that really wanted to but needed to get a few things arranged before they signed a contract and had already had a site assessment and had a proposal in hand, we gave them another month to sign a contract. So we had a contract signing party at Riggs Brewery on the 31st, and it was kind of a celebration for folks who were interested in solar, folks who had signed contracts, and also kind of an invitation for folks that hadn't yet signed a contract to come out and do it on the last day. And in fact, at least one person did sign a contract on the last day, and I think a couple of folks signed a letter of intent on the last day. So we sent out a press release maybe the day before that said we had just reached 250 kilowatts of installed capacity. By the time we went to the contract signing party, we were already over 300. So not sure where we're going to end up at the end of the month, maybe 400 kilowatts of installed capacity. We did 605 last year, so we didn't think that we were going to repeat 605. Our goal was 250 for this year, so we're already well past that. So pretty happy about that, and that'll wrap up the end of this month, and installations will be ongoing through the rest of the year. The next item on solar, I'm going to skip because it's an agenda item, and we'll touch on it then, talk about it a little bit further. The next item, Property Assessed Clean Energy bill was signed by the governor, so that is now law. Staff before and since the signing of the bill have spoken with colleagues in other municipalities in the state and having some preliminary discussions about what the best way to implement a PACE program is. And I've been suggesting that a single large PACE district that any city could opt into, a PACE district that would grow over time and bundle lots of different cities, commercial properties into one PACE program that can attract investors, might be really advantageous rather than lots of little PACE programs for every small city in the state. So we're going to continue to discuss that. And Todd, I don't know if you want to say anything about PACE. I know you're familiar with it.
I not a whole lot, but I guess I wondered about the large PACE district idea, and are you talking about that literally? You know, I guess I'm wondering, does the legislature or does the legislation allow that literally, or is it the idea of like a virtual large district?
The legislation leaves a lot unsaid.
Okay.
It certainly defines a lot of elements to, especially in terms of the rigor of any potential PACE contracts. So our PACE law has the same rigor, maybe more than other states, in terms of ensuring that any property assessed loans for clean energy, renewable energy projects are bona fide money-saving energy projects. So that's all really good in the law. It does specifically say that cities can join with other municipalities in the state to share a PACE district. The law actually calls it a PACE area, at least the last time I read the bill. And so it specifically authorizes that. It just doesn't describe how that would be done. So it doesn't describe a legal mechanism, a memorandum of understanding, an ordinance, a nonprofit 501c3. It doesn't really prescribe that. Cities do have to pass an ordinance to allow PACE loans within their jurisdiction. But beyond that, there's not a lot of description, which could be good. It may mean that we have flexibility.
Mm-hmm. And I think the city, would be in position to, right now the county has property taxes, and I don't believe the city does that right now. So that would be another just administrative thing to deal with.
Yeah, that's another item that I don't think the statute is very explicit about in terms of delineating responsibilities, cities versus county tax collectors, county tax assessors. It's not very explicit, at least the last time I read the bill.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there are any changes since it became law.
Okay. I've been talking with a number of different folks around commercial PACE, and one of them is a group that does it in other states around the country. And so there's some pretty, I think there's some pretty good model programs out there, and so one resource that we're looking at right now is called PACE in a Box, and I think that's for some work out of Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, that could be something.
Yeah. There's maybe half the states in the country have a PACE statute,
Something like
somewhere
that.
around there. So there's lots of models out there that we can draw from.
Mm-hmm.
Some additional energy and climate related activities. Yesterday, the mayor and I spoke at a Sierra Club event called Clean Energy Town Hall, as did Mayor Finan in Champaign and Senator Scott Bennett. And a number of nonprofit organizations spoke as well. So all talking about clean energy topics, especially the Future Energy Jobs Act. And I mentioned some of the things I'll talk about tonight in terms of renewable energy. Also, recently, ICLEI, with Local Governments for Sustainability, it's a city sustainability professional association that we're a member of, selected myself as well as some others to be a part of a delegation that would go to COP23, the Conference of Parties, part of the UN Climate Conference, the reoccurring conference in Bonn, Germany, to represent the views of local governments and community organizations. So there's actually a fundraising campaign for that. The link is in the packet. On our water plan, and there's a note on the agenda in terms of announcements for this. The city, the Park District, and the Midwest Pesticide Action Network are launching a natural lawn care program, education and advocacy program starting September 16th, Saturday, at 10 a.m. It'll be at the south lawn of this property, so just south of this building. And there's going to be several activities, both kid and adult appropriate activities regarding natural lawn care. So a nice educational program. There will be a couple of speakers who will talk about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And the city will be committing that south lawn as a pesticide-free, chemical-free lawn. So we're going to abstain from chemical fertilizers and pesticides in that area and just utilize natural lawn care practices. There may be a dandelion now and again, but that may be worth it. And so it's almost a pilot test for us to see where else we can use this kind of practice. That's the same area that also has our new pollinator garden, butterfly and pollinator garden, installed by the Arbor Division. So that's a good space for that.
Can you repeat again, where is that?
It's the south lawn from this building.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's across the street from the farmers market. So hopefully folks will see that we're doing something and wander over. And of course we've been doing advertising, and we'll hope to draw a lot of folks from the farmers market to stop by.
Are you still looking for volunteers for that event?
You're very welcome to come out and help. We have filled all of the slots that the Midwest Pesticide Action Center asked for, but certainly come out. There is, next item, there's a long piece of information from Courtney Kwong on the new electronics law passed by the state. It's really, really important, big change. I won't describe it all. Courtney's the expert in it, and it's in your packet. But to summarize, we have one more year of the status quo where the city and other municipalities in the county are going to have to partner and foot the bill for an electronics recycling event. So we'll do 2 events most likely next year. We do the events primarily because there is no market for CRT TVs and monitors. You can find recyclers who will take other electronics because there's enough recoverable value, but there's no one who will take a CRT TV because it's negative value. So we do electronics recycling events, and we take not just the CRTs, because if we took just the CRTs, we would just be taking all negative value. So we take all electronics and use the ones that have some value to kind of pay off the CRTs. We're going to do that for one more year. After that, a new product stewardship type law takes effect. This will see electronics manufacturers fund a number of permanent electronics collection facilities around the state. These will probably be existing household hazardous waste facilities run by municipalities and existing retail outlets that probably sell electronics who will be partnered with the electronics manufacturers to accept electronics for recycling. So that will take that entire burden off of cities and put that on the manufacturers. So in a roundabout way, I suppose purchasers are prepaying their recycling costs in that sense. So this is really great. This is a great model, this product stewardship model. Courtney, the recycling coordinator, has been working with a product stewardship group in Illinois, which is affiliated with the National Product Stewardship Institute, I believe is the name, and they are pioneering product stewardship of lots of different hard-to-recycle products in states all over the U.S. So really exciting to get this done in Illinois.
I had a question. Has the city of Urbana or other cities considered the end of life of solar panels?
So there's not a lot of hazardous materials in solar panels. The traditional, what most people have is silicon. So there's silicon, which is glass, and then there's the metal racking, which is easily recyclable. There may be some of the more exotic solar panel technologies may have some other type of materials in it. The way that we structure, and pretty much everyone structures power purchase agreements, is at the end of the agreement, 25-year life typically, the installer removes all the equipment. Well, the installer will give us an opportunity to purchase the equipment at fair market value and keep it. Otherwise, they remove all of the equipment and it's theirs. We don't have any provisions in our contract of what they would do with that equipment at that point.
Going back to the electronics recycling, I know this is like a year out in terms of switching to this product stewardship model, but will there be a plan like from the city in terms of getting the word out and letting people know exactly where this ends up being, whether it's going to be at Best Buy or wherever, or
Right.
some other site around town?
Yeah, I don't know exactly how those locations will be determined, and I don't know if the city would have input or whether the city needs input. If it's a facility in the county, that's probably good enough. Where our Urbana residents are already going to Parkland to recycle electronics, but certainly we will be doing communications to let people know that there's a new permanent facility where they can take their electronics for recycling. We have a pretty extensive webpage on the city's website called Where Do I Recycle It? And it's kind of a laundry list of everything you could think of that's not taken in the U-Cycle collection. Courtney is also working with a group in the county on household hazardous waste management. They have applied for a grant that would get some assistance for them in terms of further developing their plan and evaluating and potentially starting a nonprofit organization that would help facilitate household hazardous waste collection. So that's all part of household hazardous waste plan that was, or toolkit that was published by the Regional Planning Commission a couple of years ago. So if you want to see kind of the long-term trend of where they're planning to go, it's all in that plan. Our next meeting would be October 3rd at 7 p.m. in this room.
Scott, thank you so much for your report this evening. It sounds like there's so much going on, and I attended the Sierra Club a meeting last night that talked about the Future Energy Jobs Act, and I thought that it was a pretty good meeting. There was a lot of information that was presented to the folks that were there. There were lots of ways for members of the public to get involved with multiple organizations within the community who are working on environmental issues in our community. And I am hoping that they make the information about what the Future Energy Jobs Act is all about. The presentation that was given by a third-year law student from U of I talking about the bill, I was hoping that they could make that a little bit more public. I learned that there is a lot more funding in the bill than I thought was originally there, and that a lot of it will be for solar, for commercial solar projects, as well as community solar projects. And I thought it was a pretty great meeting. I thought Scott did also a really great job of presenting in that meeting, and I didn't even know that you were talking, so great job last night. Let's see. Are there any questions from members of the audience about anything that was discussed in the staff report? I think you should use the mic.
Because it's recorded.
So I'll try and make it quick.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, Marcus Ricci. I'm a planner with the City of Urbana and the liaison to the Sustainability Advisory Commission. One question on the PACE project. It says strategies to increase renewable energy purchasing in the commercial sector. Is it only for renewables, or will it also fund energy efficiency and conservation projects?
PACE includes energy efficiency as well as renewable energy improvements to commercial buildings.
Okay. Do those proposed projects require an investment grade audit to prove that they're going to be good projects?
I don't recall that language.
Okay.
There is some tests that have to be overcome by the project. Again, my recollection is it's not specific, the statute is not specific on who proposes those tests, whether it's a municipality or a third-party PACE program administrator that's hired. But there are some tests to ensure that it's a bona fide energy project that pays for itself within, I can't remember. No, it's not a year. It's I think what it says is the payback period can't be longer than the useful life of the equipment.
Okay, that makes sense. And then going back to the city's city facility and street lighting, understanding that the bundle has to pay back in less than 20 years, knowing that there are several sorts of projects that can have a really quick payback, like LED street lighting, and understanding that nobody wants vanity projects in there, but are there some stretch sort of projects that might themselves have a payback of more than 20 years, but because they're bundled, that the city, that would bring it back underneath the 20 that the city's looking at?
Yeah, that's probably how it'll turn out.
Okay.
So our understanding at this point is that streetlights, LED streetlights, and interior LED lighting in our facilities are going to be the saver projects that pay for the not so good payback period projects. So some of those projects that have a long payback period may, on their own terms individually, be longer than 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would be balancing those out with these very short payback period projects like streetlights and interior lighting.
I think that was all of my questions. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for your question. Are there any other questions from the commission on the staff report? No. If not, is there any continuing business from the last meeting to address? New business, discuss landfill renewables.
So the city has issued 2 requests for qualification. The first is a request for qualification for a landfill solar developer. What we've done is not asked for pricing because there's too many unknowns to really establish a good price. For instance, utility interconnection costs with Ameren is an unknown until a solar developer spends a substantial amount of money paying for a utility interconnection study. And developers don't do that until they have a project, right? Until they have land locked up for them to work on developing. Other unknowns are some of the state incentive programs, the SREC procurement programs. For instance, the long-range renewable energy plan is going to describe some of those state incentive SREC procurement programs to be published probably this month. So that's another unknown. Also, even though the plan will be published in draft this month, it will go to the Illinois Commerce Commission, who will likely make some amendments to the plan, and then a final plan will be published early next year. So the exact pricing and the exact structure won't really be certain for some of the SREC incentive programs until next year. There are some initial state incentive programs that are being conducted right now. So some of those are known. So what we're doing is soliciting qualifications for an experienced and qualified partner to work with to develop one or more utility scale or at least large scale solar arrays at our closed landfill. So there's sort of a stack of benefits that the city gets from such a project. One, the most obvious, is we get to increase renewable energy development in our own community. Two, we would likely receive lease payment from the commercial developer. They're a business making money on our property, so they pay us a lease rate. Three, we would likely receive tax revenue from the commercial developer. That property, now being primarily a business operation, would now be on the property tax rolls. Four, the city could potentially be an off-taker of some of that renewable power. So we may be able to enter into a 25-year power purchase agreement for, say, all the electricity that our buildings need or all the electricity that our streetlights need. That's speculative, depends on pricing and so forth, but it's a possibility. And five, we may be able to, especially by having this more of a public-private partnership model, we may be able to reserve or carve out a portion of the landfill, a portion of the projects for residential community solar subscription uptake. That is even more challenging. I don't believe there are any residential community solar projects in Illinois. This new law enables them, has specific SREC procurement incentives for community solar. However, there are challenges to community solar. One is when there's a huge distinction in terms of administrative costs when you're talking about selling 2 megawatts of power to one off-taker for 25 years versus 2 megawatts or some less amount of power to thousands of off-takers on one-year contracts. It's a completely different proposition and has a lot more costs. The other challenge is the state community solar, the Future Energy Jobs Act allows the community solar SREC incentives to go to community solar projects that have as little as 3 off-takers, with no off-taker being more than 40%. So potentially someone could develop a 2 megawatt commercial solar array, sell power to 3 large factories, let's say, and utilize the community solar SRECs. And if a lot of developers are able to put those types of projects together, that's advantageous for them because that dramatically reduces administrative costs, and it may leave folks interested in a residential community solar offtake with no SRECs left to utilize. So we're going to try and drive first as much solar development as we can through a partner on the landfill, and then secondarily see if we can take some portion of that power, and third, see if we can reserve a portion of it for a community solar offtake. All of these developments would be ballasted, so they're not going to puncture the clay cap on our landfill. The wiring for it would be run on the ground in trays, and then in trays above any access roads that they need to cross. Again, staying out of the closed landfill. And whatever the footprint is that the solar developer needs, they're going to own the property maintenance for that, which means that the city no longer has to mow the lawn on the closed landfill. So, lots of benefit stack there. And I'll pause there to see if you have any questions on that.
I'm curious about, do we have a sense of the city of Urbana benefit, financially, just forgetting about the solar energy and any, PPAs or other energy services, but just on the leasing arrangements and, conversion to taxable property. Were there any other categories?
Those are the two financial, well,
And then there was the maintenance one that
Sure.
you just mentioned.
So there's financial savings in the maintenance.
Mhm.
Potentially, depending on the pricing, there may be financial savings on the electricity purchase for city facilities. There is likely a tax revenue benefit from a property that has not been on the tax
Yep.
tax rolls in 100 years or however long the city's owned it. I haven't estimated what those taxes are or would be, and haven't asked anyone else to.
Okay.
And then there's the lease payment. The lease payments, another unknown, how that will end up in Illinois. Certainly, if we had a perfectly flat piece of land that had no expectation of settling and no liability concerns of contamination underneath, we would get a higher lease rate. So if you're, agriculture on the edge of town, that's a prime development site. So we're not going to get as good of a rate as that. However, I've seen numbers anywhere from a couple $100 to $1,000 an acre. So a megawatt is 4 acres. Maybe most of the state SREC procurement incentives are limited to individual projects no greater than 2 megawatts. The notion is that they don't want a few large property owners to soak up all of the incentives. They want lots of different regions and municipalities and property owners to benefit. What's not clear in the law is whether a single property, especially a brownfield or a landfill, could co-locate different solar arrays that are taking advantage of different SREC procurement programs. So, for instance, can you put a 2 megawatt incentivized community solar array next to a 2 megawatt distributed generation incentivized solar array? It's not certain. That presumably everyone's aware of this this absence in the statute. So presumably a proposal will appear in the long-range procurement plan.
Is there a sense of, just assuming could work out somehow, how many 2 megawatt arrays could land?
We have perhaps 20 acres of land at the landfill. That is pretty good. We have another 20 acres that is not so good. Too many trees, too much slope, awfully speculative for that second 20 acres.
Mm-hmm.
But I think 15 to 20 is definitely in play. A bigger limiting factor will be whether we can co-locate two 2 megawatt arrays and get state incentives for both.
Right.
It's the state SRECs in the Future Energy Jobs Act that are very, very transformative in terms of feasibility of these projects.
Do you see the city, kind of like the solar project right now? The city has played a role as a convener with some outside expertise, basically an aggregation process. Do you see a similar kind of dynamic? Solar UC 2.0,
Yeah.
3.0, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good question. Let me start by explaining community solar, in case folks are confused about how that's different from what we're doing now. The Solar Urbana-Champaign program is a bulk solar purchase program that lowers the costs for cash purchase of individual solar arrays on people's own property. So on the roof of their house, behind their business, plugged right into their meter, and cash purchase. The money's up front, you pay for it. Community solar sees a developer install a single large solar array on the edge of town, so to speak, takes advantage of economies of scale of doing a large solar array, and then sells the power from that solar array to lots of individual subscribers in town. So it's very similar in that transactional sense to a home or business choosing a retail electric supplier or choosing municipal electric aggregation as their retail electric supply. They don't own the panels. They're not buying 4 panels on some financed deal. They're buying kilowatt hour per kilowatt hour at a set rate, probably in something like a 1-year contract. And so it's a little bit different setup. It's very powerful in terms of getting more household types involved in solar energy. So if a person has a house like mine that has 2 city street trees completely shading the roof, I can't put a solar array feasibly on my roof and get any amount of power generated. But I can subscribe. I can choose my supplier as this community solar array on the edge of town. Ameren still delivers the kilowatts, still gives you the bill. Just like if you're in municipal electric aggregation, there's a line item that says, who your supplier is. I presume it'll be the same thing. The bill will look just like that. Additionally, apartment dwellers who don't own the building, don't own the roof, can ask for a quarter of the roof to be devoted to them to make a $20,000 investment on a property that they're only going to live at for a year or 2 or 3. This is a way for them to also be able to participate in solar energy. So it's a really great model in terms of capturing those other household types. So back to your question.
Yeah.
I would envision that if we're the property owner with a request for qualifications leading to a sort of public-private partnership, leading to a solar developer who will put up some amount of solar and bring in a community solar subscription service manager. It's typically a separate company. There are a few companies that do it internally. I presume that they would be happy to partner with the city and have the city help promote subscriptions and get the first year subscribed. It may be very similar to Solar UC in that we help promote the program, get it up and running, and then the vendor takes it and runs with it, which is what's happened with the Solar UC. I don't know that we're going to forever do a lot of communications, say, as contracts turn over,
Sure.
right? And that's also somewhat similar to municipal electric aggregation. We get it set up, we promote it, advertise it, and then it kind of runs on its own throughout the term of the contract. We take calls and advise people, but it's not a lot of staff time that has to be contributed.
So you mentioned municipal aggregation. I was wondering about how does this interact with our municipal aggregation? Seems like a similar kind of thing. It might be a complication. I know that this current aggregation has a beginning and an end. I don't know if Homefield could take on, be a developer or something through that municipal aggregation to help stabilize the investment. That's one thing, and then I also wonder about, is there interaction? Well, is there potential interaction with commercial PACE? That's a little bit, abstract mental stretch. But anyways.
Well, on the first question, it's my understanding that this will be like any other supplier choice for the resident. They will, or for the account holder, they will either be subscribing to Ameren Power, Municipal Electric Aggregation Power, another alternative retail electric supplier, or community solar, not more than one at a time. Because in all of those cases, what the account holder is doing is paying someone to put a certain amount of kilowatts on the grid on their behalf. And then somewhere else at their house or business, they pull off the grid an equal amount of kilowatt hours, not the exact same electrons, just an equal amount. And so you can't have double counting or less than full counting. So that's my understanding of it. In terms of Homefield, it's my understanding that they are not in that business. They are not in the solar development business, as far as I know, and they are not in the community solar subscription management business, as far as I know. Maybe they would get into it, but I don't foresee that.
On the commercial pace, one thing I was wondering is, if my subscription costs a certain amount of money, and that subscription is attached to the property tax ID, then does that classify as an improvement to the property?
If you're just say you're a business and you're going to subscribe to the community solar array at the edge of town, it's a power purchase agreement. It's a energy.
Okay.
It's a service
Okay.
agreement. You're
Okay.
not making any improvements to your building.
Yeah. Okay. That's all I got. Thank you.
Going back to the location, is there any current environmental monitoring going on at the landfill?
Yeah, this landfill is released from post-closure. Post-closure means after the landfill stops taking waste, it enters post-closure agreements and rules and regulations with Illinois EPA. And we're beyond that. So there are no Illinois EPA rules and regulations. Nonetheless, we continue to do well monitoring at the landfill. We also have some leachate collection at the landfill. We're going to continue those probably forever because that's just how it is with landfills. We may do a little bit less over time, but we'll probably always maintain some. The portion of the landfill that is actually pretty flat and more desirable for solar actually has a three-party agreement, Urbana-Champaign and the university, that has the three entities collaborating on maintenance of that portion of the landfill. If anything goes wrong, everyone who contributed or could be found to have contributed significant amounts of waste could be liable in US EPA's eyes. And so that's why they're all three parties, not just the property owner, Urbana, partners in that maintenance. And it seems feasible and likely that at least some of the revenues, maybe the lease revenue from the solar array, would be contributed to landfill maintenance. We do some testing at our leachate pump for the landfill, and all of the reports I've seen, it's always been below acceptable standards. All the leachate that we pump goes to the wastewater treatment facility, which is the other side of the fence from the landfill. So that's where we're at. What typical landfill solar development contracts say is that it's got to be ballasted, no punctures. They may, or we may be wise to include some descriptions of the equipment that is used. For instance, equipment with tracks on it rather than wheels. All things to protect the cap. And some provisions about what can and cannot happen on the landfill vis-a-vis the solar developer. Essentially what we're trying to do with the landfill is entomb the waste forever. It was ill-advised to put lots of the things that went in there in the last 100 years, and it's too expensive to remove it. And so what we're trying to do is entomb it, put clay on top, shed water off of it so that water doesn't go into it and pull pollutants out, and keep the groundwater and also the surface water, the stream that's next to the landfill, clean. Any other questions on solar? Okay. At the same time, sorry. Deb.
Is that a comment about solar
No, well, also under landfill renewables.
under landfill renewables? Okay,
Yes.
let's go ahead and move on to additional landfill renewables. Usually, just so for members of the public, we're kind of instituting a process for our meetings where we'll ask for public input after the communications report, continuing business, if there is any new business, and then I think after announcements, if members of the public would like to address us. Since this is just a long topic and we do have we've got two agenda items under new business, I just, for public benefit, after we're done talking about landfill renewables, I'll open it for a public question if it's about that, so we don't have to wait for your relevant question now until after that second item is finished, if that's acceptable to everybody. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks,
One
Scott.
other item under landfill renewables. At the same time, we issued a request for qualification for a very specific type of wind energy development. In reviewing and researching community solar subscription companies, I came across a startup company that is innovating a model of wind energy development that, instead of seeing huge wind facilities, a facility being 20 wind turbines, 40 wind turbines, financed by Wall Street, they are instead developing 1 or 2 wind turbines at a time and developing the funding, the financing from local community micro investors, meaning local community members could invest as little as $100 and help finance and develop and advance a new wind turbine that would be in or near their community. This is a really interesting model in that we can do things we already want to do, advance renewable energy. Another thing we might want to do, be an off-taker of that renewable energy, and then also create a sustainable investing opportunity with a real cash return for our community members. I don't know if this is a feasible project for our landfill or any other property we own, but it's interesting enough that we should pursue it as far as we can. And so we issued a request for qualifications for community crowd-funded landfill or community crowd-funded wind energy developer. And we got one response, the company innovating this model. And so we're going to do a similar thing in terms of letters of intent and partnership and public-private partnership, and see the developer invest in a utility interconnection study and a feasibility study, and we'll see how far we can go with this. The landfill has some spots that may be feasible. Probably we would not put a wind turbine on top of where there is buried waste. I don't think that would be structurally sound. However, there are lots of edges and corners of the landfill that do not have buried waste, and so those may be feasible. We do have some neighbors that are appropriate for a landfill, like an interstate, a wastewater treatment plant, and then of course the buried garbage. There are some households, some residential properties somewhat nearby our closed landfill. That's part of feasibility. We don't know if that's a feasible site at this point or not. And in part, that'll be the developer's responsibility, as well as the cities and the communities.
My question is about the size of the turbine. What's typically, is it 100 kilowatts, 250 kilowatts? Do you know?
I think they've described that size, but I don't recall. My general recollection is it isn't the latest, greatest, really, really tall ones, but it's also not residential scale, like a flagpole size.
Right, so maybe like the one that Ameren has at their testing center. Or
It may be bigger than that, because that's Well,
I
it's
can't
certainly
remember if
not
that was
utility.
100 or 250, but it was,
Yeah.
you know, sort of medium small.
It's
It's larger
kinda
than a
small.
house.
Yeah, yeah.
It's larger than a red box.
Yeah, and whether they have flexibility on the size remains to be determined. You know, they have to make it, you know, cash flow. So we'll see.
And from the request for qualifications, are they limited to the landfill site at this point, or can they look at other locations?
My recollection is our document said landfill site or other properties. If they were to find a property that the city does not own, that would still be good. We wouldn't get the lease revenue, we wouldn't get the tax revenue. Well, actually, we might get the tax revenue because it'd be improving a piece of property. Although it potentially could be a property in the county. And that would still be good because it would still be an investment opportunity, you know, clean energy investment opportunity for our residents. And that might be worth it for us. That might be good enough for us to, you know, be an active supporter of the project. But at that point, we probably wouldn't be a contractual party to the project. Probably only if it's a property that the city owns. So that's our kind of our first tier because we get those added benefits of lease and tax. So we'll see how that develops.
Are there any other questions from the commission on community wind? Okay, are there any questions from members of the public about the solar project or community wind? Thor?
Marcus Ritchie, City of Urbana. So I think on one of the earlier, even earlier discussions about the community solar or solar at the landfill, one of the questions of concern was regarding the municipal aggregation, whether that would throw the city into becoming a generator in conflict with the aggregation contract. Am I misremembering that? Or would that be a concern if we have to contract to purchase so much from and then all of a sudden we're generating?
The municipal electric aggregation contract, to my recollection, well, I know for a fact that it allows any individual customer to opt out. They can also leave once they're opted in. My recollection is it does not have any requirements for any number of accounts to be maintained, nor any particular level of kilowatt hour subscription to be maintained.
Okay.
It's certainly worth rereading the contract, but I don't think that there's any problem with that.
Okay, that the city start
Right.
being a generator.
And the city
Okay.
will not be the generator. We won't own the project. We
Okay.
will be leasing property to a developer. In the grand scheme of things, it's some amount of business that is going to move from municipal electric aggregation or other retail electric suppliers to the solar array. But it's a fraction.
I think even though the point that it isn't the city doing the generation, it's a third party doing it, is probably enough
Mhm.
to satisfy even that question. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the audience to address about this topic? And please identify yourself. Yes. Your name.
Dave Monk, 115 North Market. Bill Gray had me go out to Olympian Drive this afternoon to have a look at a plot of ground that I might do for prairie. But it made me remind, I'm sorry, I thought this was a council meeting, and I didn't want to bust into what you're doing. But it seems to me that when we had U2B2 or whatever it was 6 or 7 or 8 years ago, there's a lot of debate about putting prairie on the side of the Olympian Drive. And I was watching the berms on either side are quite wide. And I think, considering the emphasis that had been put on prairie and pollinators and stuff like that, it would be diplomatic to to think about putting in prairie seed there. Not just prairie grasses, but broadleaves as well. So I thought I'd come along and say my piece. But if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
In terms of the closed landfill, we'd want to be very careful on what plant species we choose for a ground cover. Prairie plants have, as you know, have a very deep root structure,
Yes.
and we may not want roots going all the way through a clay cap, as that may create the ability to have water infiltrate more easily through that clay cap. So if there were, so as you may know, the city is part of the Mayors for Monarch Pledge, and so we're always looking for more opportunities to increase monarch habitat, but also other pollinators. And if there was an opportunity to choose a plant that could provide habitat or nectar or pollen to pollinators and monarchs, we would definitely want to consider that plant. But we would need to also very carefully consider the viability of our clay cap on the landfill.
Yes, but this is not the landfill. This
Oh,
is
you're talking somewhere else.
Olympian Drive. That's prairie soil. And yes, usually Department of Transportation plants its brome grass and other grasses that are mowable. Unfortunately, on the Kickapoo Trail, we have 2 feet of white and yellow clover for 2 miles. And that is really one of our worst weeds. It's a very good hay crop, and it has nitrogen in it. It's a legume, so it's a sort of self-fertilizer. But it's a really mean prairie weed. And so I would hope that that sort of thing doesn't happen. But I think, yes, you could actually have a very good prairie along there, and it's quite wide. I would say in some places it's 20 feet wide.
Yeah, that's an interesting opportunity
Yeah,
to think about
but
that.
you'd have to be fairly quick to get seed. It's probably ordered up 8 years ago. And you don't change the system too quickly. We've learned that.
Does the city own any land?
There's
Olympian Drive?
yeah, there's a couple little tiny awkward shaped parcels along there.
Yes, Bill was wanting me to look at something that seemed to be a railroad right away, north of where the old roundhouse used to be. And I haven't quite located where it is, but you do seem to own that. Do you know what he's talking about?
I don't know that particular parcel. I know there's a parcel along there that I think is going to have a retention pond on it or something like that, or maybe it's borrow or something. There's a couple little parcels.
Yes.
I don't know if we're intending to own them long term or if it's just part of the project.
Yes,
but
when you
it's
did
worth
Windsor
exploring.
Road, seven groups were involved, and then eventually it went to Champaign. And so that probably is the same sort of thing
Could be.
will happen, but it probably would go to Urbana,
Could
I
be.
would think.
Mhm.
Well, thanks for having me. Say,
Thank you for your comments.
very pleased. Do I have to sign here?
I don't know.
Thank you. I'm interested in what you're talking about.
All right, so I think, have we wrapped up for solar and community wind? All right, our next agenda item is commission outreach activities under new business, to have a discussion about sort of what outreach activities might the commission engage in, or what might we like to do to, I don't know, increase our presence or awareness of what we do in the community, but I don't exactly know what outreach activities looks like. I think it's up to us to sort of make it up, and we can be as active or inactive as we want to be. But we've had previous discussions and several discussions about sort of participation, community participation in our meetings, and then that sort of goes into, well, what are we doing out sort of in the community? And so just sort of opening that up for discussion on outreach.
So I don't know if I missed an earlier conversation about it when I missed a couple meetings, but to me, outreach it's so important and it's so time consuming. And everybody, I believe everybody here, I know everybody here, every single person in the room is involved in outreach in one way or another, either for their job or for their, something in their personal household or even just things for the commission. And so I'd like us to think of things that we could do that build on existing outreach programs in one way or another. Just off the top of my head, when we do go to help at the farmers market table for UC Solar, somehow bring up the commission, or I don't know, maybe have stickers that say we're with the commission, we're with the Sustainability Advisory Commission. Putting, if we wanted to specifically invite participants, reaching out to groups that already get invited places to have them join us, like, I don't know, the Boys and Girls Club or something to that effect. That's my first thought.
Maybe there's a small mentoring opportunity with groups like the Boys and Girls Club or Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, or other, maybe the high school sustainability clubs. So maybe it's a commitment of the student or whoever attends a couple of meetings, and we go to like some of their club meetings,
So we have a couple of events on the agenda, and some folks are helping volunteer at those events, and that's a great example, I think, of what Stacy might be considering. There's also, there's, as Morgan, I think you mentioned, the farmers market is an opportunity, and certainly we could provide paper name badges for any event that any of you wanted to go to, and just be there with a name badge that says Sustainability Advisory Commission and talk to people about what the city's working on and solicit other folks' input. There's also city council meetings where some of these events are advertised. For instance, we had a flyer for the Natural Lawn Care Program in city council packet. I was at another event, so I didn't show up to city council to speak about it personally. That's another avenue as well.
So there are several ideas and ways that we could do outreach, from volunteering to inviting organizations, to hosting or having events with some youth group type organizations, as we are sort of continuing discussion about what we can do with some youth. I'm curious if there are any outreach activities that we could be working on or building capacity for the community solar or community wind projects out in the community.
I think when those projects develop, that would be a great opportunity. I don't know that there's much to do at this point. These are very long timeline projects, so we're talking about 2019, energization dates. So there's going to be a lot of project development behind the scenes before that.
Perhaps we might want to have a film series or a speaker series to engage the community on various sustainability topics, gearing up towards the wind and solar or other events.
I would just like to personally sort of invite the commission members that if you feel like you've got the bandwidth capacity and would like to pursue any individual activity, that you can absolutely bring it here, sort of to a commission meeting. We can discuss it and sort of perhaps work on that together. So, yeah. I don't have anything real specific on this to bring to the table right now in terms of any. I look forward to volunteering at the lawn care event on Saturday, and hope to see some of you there and hope to see some of the audience there as well. And again, if there's any events that you would like to see happen or projects done, then we can certainly talk about it and perhaps work on some sort of plans for implementation.
I have one that just came up for me last month. I am unfamiliar with what the city what the process is for commercial businesses, small businesses or large, in this town to do recycling. I just don't know how that works. So I don't know if maybe we could make it an agenda item for a bit of an explanation of what the options are, and then we could help tell people, because I was, downtown Urbana, and I asked one of the small businesses there who seems to care a lot about the environment, do you recycle? And they don't. And they said, we don't think there is recycle. We don't think it's available. So I had trouble believing that it wasn't available, but then I realized I didn't know the answer to tell them. So it'd be good to get us up to speed I don't think I'm the only one who doesn't know, and then maybe we could work on spreading that word as a commission.
We can have an agenda item on that. I'll also give you the 5-second answer. City ordinance requires all licensed garbage haulers to also offer or subcontract and offer recycling services to their customers.
Is there a longer answer that would make it worthwhile for that to be an agenda item, or to invite Courtney Kwong here to give a presentation on recycling for commercial? And or adding to that a presentation on the electronics recycling changes with the electronics recycling law changes?
I don't know if there's a longer answer to that specific question, but there's certainly more that could be discussed on that topic.
Yeah, like how do we get them to actually do the recycling?
Also, if it were an agenda item and that was something that was of interest to business owners in downtown Urbana, if we know that in advance, we could also target in advance and kind of let some folks know, I'm not an expert on what this topic is, but because we've heard from some of you that that this could be an issue and that we're just not really sure how to get increased uptake of recycling by Urbana businesses, that we would like to have them, also attend the meeting because it could be informative for them. All right. Just as part of the second agenda item under new business, are there any questions from the audience on addressing commission outreach activities? If there's nothing, then I'll just move on. Okay, thank you very much. Announcements?
I have an announcement. I had the opportunity to tour Dark Containers Densifier this afternoon, and it was quite exciting. And I got to see the public drop-off location, and it's very accessible. And so I'd like to encourage everyone to drop off their styrofoam to Dart Container, and I think I can have this posted online. So, yeah. Dart Container is the company, and they accept expanded polystyrene plastic number 6.
Dart Container, formerly known as Solo Cup. And we have a note on that recycling opportunity on our where do I recycle it page.
I could add a comment on that. What they're doing is they bought a machine that compacts styrofoam into bundles that are about 47 pounds so that they can send a semi-trailer to jobbers that buy that for reconstituted plastic stuff. And I talked to the manager, and he's getting me more information, but I think it's a public service. So it's really good.
Do we need anyone to read the announcements that are on the agenda? I don't know. Yeah. I'll go ahead and I'll read those. On September 5th at 8 a.m., there's registration for the October Electronics Recycling event. So I guess it starts September 5th at 8 a.m. Since registration is required, I'm sure that you'll want to register for that event early to reserve your spot in line.
Residents can still call in to Public Works, and Courtney's taking names in case there are cancellations, and she can get them a slot to drop off.
Okay, sorry. Thank you for the clarification. September 16th, join us for the Midwest Grows Green Natural Lawn Care Program on the south lawn of the Urbana City Building at 10 a.m. And also, the same day is going to be the Urbana Drive Electric Fair from 2 to 6 p.m. Does anyone have any more information about the Urbana Drive Electric Fair?
They have a website, and there is maybe 7 or 8 electric cars that are going to be there. I presume most of them will be there for people to co-pilot. I will be there with the city's electric vehicle, and we'll be giving folks rides after they fill out a liability waiver.
And it's part of National Drive Electric Day or Week, and it is to support the promotion of more electric vehicles and EV charging stations and things like that. So it's a really good event to see the transition from fossil fuel-based cars to vehicles that could be powered by renewable energy.
And just a couple of congratulations. Congratulations to Morgan on her recent marriage. And also Scott for having been selected as a finalist for the COP23 People's Delegation to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So congratulations on that to you as well, Morgan. All right. Any other final thoughts before we adjourn? All right, meeting adjourned.
You have to take a motion.
Oh, gosh.
I move to adjourn.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.